We have countless conversations with our allies. And wherever I travel in the world, I talk to Canada's allies about this difficult moment we're having with China. There are many messages that are being sent to Chinese officials, among those in the world who believe in a rules-based international trading order. Who are they to say that there's no value in Canada talking to its allies about issues that we have abroad in a multilateral system? That's how we do diplomacy.
That's how Minister of International Trade Diversification Jim Carr reacted today to a statement from a Chinese government official. The official at a news conference said Canada is naive to think rallying its allies can sway China. A Canadian government source is also confirming President Donald Trump did indeed raise the issue of detained Canadians when he met with Chinese President Xi at the G20 last week. So, is diplomacy the answer, or is it just a dead end? Time for the Power Panel. In Toronto, Amanda Alvaro of Pomp and Circumstance, and here with me in studio from Summa Strategies, Tim Powers, and Kathleen Monk of Earnscliffe Strategy Group. Welcome, everybody.
Hey, Katie.
I'm going to start with Amanda in Toronto. So China basically says today at this news conference, a reporter asked the Foreign Ministry spokesman about Justin Trudeau saying he was confident that Donald Trump brought up this issue. But they dismissed it, saying Canada shouldn't be naive and that rallying their allies is not how this is going to work. How does the government respond to that, and how do they sort of go forward from here?
Well, you just heard from Minister Carr, and I think that that's probably like-minded of all others in government right now. I mean, Canada is in obviously a very difficult position. At the forefront of that is trying to retrieve these detainees who have now spent many months in China. We saw that Globe and Mail report today that talked about reading glasses being taken away from one of the detainees, and being referred to as cruel. So the kind of conditions that they're in, it's paramount that these discussions are happening because, as he said, diplomacy is really our window. It's really our opportunity. Rallying the international community around this is kind of the only string we have right now, and we have to pull as many as possible. I don't think it's naive. I think it's being effective, trying to use whatever is at your disposal to get the Chinese to pay attention. And frankly, they were forced to pay attention today. The international community does have eyes on this matter, and they were forced to respond.
Tim, do you think that this pressure campaign by Canada rallying its allies is having any sort of effect?
Look, I don't think any of us know that, and we probably won't know until after the fact, and hopefully there is an after the fact, Katie, when the two Michaels get released. I would say a few things. I hope Trump talked as forcefully about our situation as he just did about the tanks that he's happy to see in Washington tomorrow. It's unfortunate we haven't heard the president himself talk about what might or may not have been said. I think, look, it's regardless of the fact that it's Donald Trump, it's important to engage the American president to help us. Though I think we do have to think about, and I think Andrew Scheer and some others are talking about this now, what other tools can we use? Do we look at the WTO? Do we look at imposing our own tariff barriers on the Chinese? Do we toughen up the approach a little bit, knowing that could have a benefit? And again, I'm sure that's being thought about, but I think rallying the allies is a natural step. But I think it's also fair to say, as the Chinese did, and that's the only thing I'd probably agree with them on, the allies talking about it is one thing, but are they going to put a lot of their own skin in the game when they have their own issues and their own irritants with the Chinese?
Kathleen, to you, do you agree that Canada it's time for Canada to toughen its stance, or is Beijing just going to Beijing and do what it wants to do until it gets what it wants?
I think that what Canada should do is actually continue, yes, toughen, but in a workmanlike way, and actually in a quiet way, however way they can. I don't know if it's helpful having Minister Carr coming back saying, who are they to say, that we're naive, we're doing our job. Listen, I understand the job of journalists is to keep on pressing to find out if the issue was raised by Trump, if it was raised by Prime Minister Trudeau. That's their job. But the government must be singularly focused on the issue of trying to get these two men released out of detention in China. And I think the way to do that is probably in a workmanlike way, doing things. Actually, I agree with Tim that what Scheer proposed in the idea of looking at counter tariffs that we could do that could have an impact is probably something that is being done over at the Lester B. Pearson building down the street, with Global Affairs, working at how, like they did, frankly, with the steel tariffs, like what they could do to exact some kind of pain, at least understand on paper what the path would be. But warring this out in the media with headlines, I don't think is helpful. And the question that I still want to ask, and I'm sure you're asking it to people, is while he may have raised, Trump may have raised the issue of the two Michaels, was there any question about the detention of the executive from Huawei? Was that also raised? Because that is an issue, really, that in many ways the Americans determined, and we were following their request. So,
and are we getting played by the Americans to a certain degree? I mean, as you know, there's a bit of a narrative that's emerging that's suggesting that now Trump is talking more openly to the Chinese or the President Xi about Huawei and maybe opening some restrictions. Oh, and by the way, if you do that, can you let us sell some more pork into China? Well, that cuts right at the heart of Canadian pork producers. So, I think any Canadian Prime Minister, to be fair to our Prime Minister, would reach out for the help of the American President. But, the trustworthiness of this American President not to put his issues first and act in the global interest is not something I'm sure we can be comforted that he will do.
Right.
Kathleen, I want to bring up something that you mentioned in your answer there, saying, Canada needs to have a singular focus. There's a tweet by the Minister of Small Business and Export Promotion, Mary Ng. She's in China right now with Peter Harder, who is the government leader in the Senate. He actually has a very extensive history in
Former
Canada.
Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Yes, so I'm very interested to hear what he has to say when he gets home, but also obviously the minister as well. But she issued a tweet, or put out a tweet yesterday that is now getting a lot of negative traction, and we're going to pull it up right now. It says, when in Beijing, you drop by Cow's Ice Cream, a true Canadian small business success story from Prince Edward Island. The world needs more of all the great things Canada has to offer, ice cream included, and that's why I'm dedicated to helping small, medium enterprises start up, scale up, and access new markets. Now, there are some photos there with her and Peter Harder eating ice cream. And so the question about that tweet, she's in China for a Davos event, in an event to strengthen business ties. But the big question is, there's this photo of them sitting there eating ice cream at a time where there are these two detained Canadians who are being held in, even Chrystia Freeland has publicly acknowledged, they are very incredibly difficult conditions. Is that somewhat tone deaf? I need to bring in her office's reaction, though. Her office did reach out to us saying that it is her job to promote small businesses around the world, and this is part of the job. And she says the number one priority is, of course, getting the two Michaels detained. But Amanda, I want to ask you first, do you think this tweet is offside given the negative tensions hanging over the Canada-China relationship right now?
Well, I think the timing is unfortunate, but you have to go back to what it is that she does. She's the Minister of Small Business and Export Promotion. Her sole focus has to be on Canadian businesses and getting them exported to new markets. That's what her job is. That's what her mandate is. She happens to be in China right now, and she happens to be highlighting a Canadian business that's successfully doing business there. But certainly not, and I think everyone knows, or people who know me well know how close I am to this particular minister as a personal friend, and I'll say that, but nobody's heart would be in a better place than Minister Mary Ng. So if there was anything at the core of what she stands for and what she believes in, it would be the release of those detained Canadians.
Kathleen?
The other thing that you really have to be careful of, and I think that sometimes we're too quick, all of us, myself included, maybe to post stuff on social without that filter, and although political staff have staff for that, to vet that stuff. I guess in terms of the businesses, Canadian businesses right now that are being impacted, I want to clarify what I said earlier. Yes, the government must be focused on releasing the two Michaels, but they also have to be focused on all of the agriculture producers, the canola farmers, the beef and pork, $6.5 billion worth of beef and pork are exported by Canada yearly. I think China is our second market for that. they have to be concerned equally for those businesses. So that tweet may read a little insensitive to those pork and beef producers and the canola farmers who are hurting right now.
And Tim, really quickly, last word to you, really quickly.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit tone deaf. It's not as bad as the Prime Minister and the plastic forks after the anti-plastic announcement, but part of the problem is a cultural problem, I think, in that the Liberal government is always driving its communications policy with a domestic eye when you need a little bit more nuance on this issue.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.